Hello everybody out there in YouTube world. It's Reagan B. Griff and his two-legger, Mr. Mike. We are bringing this video to you at request of some of our friends. We were in the hospital for 2 weeks. We had a really successful visit. It was Reagan's first time in, especially for anything that long. But I was asked over and over again on Facebook, what did we do, how did it go, etc. So someone suggested I throw it on here, so we'll see how this goes. First of all, let me back up a little bit. I knew I was probably going to end up going to the hospital, and we were trying to figure out what to do with Reagan because he has never ever in his entire life, since he's been 8 weeks old, spent more than 2 hours away from me, with the exception of his surgery to be neutered at the vet. And those 1 and 2 hour visits are across the street where he gets his spa treatment with Miss Diane, the most famous spa ever. Other than that, Mr. Reagan and I have been side by side from that moment on. So I don't know who would have more anxiety, he or me. But regardless, we were trying to figure out what to do. That didn't need to be a problem because when the doctor admitted me, they all love Reagan. One doctor, in fact, gives Reagan credit for me staying out of the hospital. So when the doctor admitted me, he said that I'd be going in, which I kind of knew it would happen. And he said, "You have a carrier, right?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah. Why do you ask?" And he said, "Well, Reagan's going with you." And I'm like, "Well, if you say so." So immediately my wheels started turning to how do we make this visit as seamless for the hospital as possible. When we go to a restaurant, my goal is for Reagan to be invisible. Now, we're at a big advantage because he's small. If I put him in a black shirt and wear a black shirt, he almost disappears. So that's kind of cool. So this doesn't, all my tips don't work for you larger dogs, and I'm sorry, but we do what we can do. Anyway, trying to make it as seamless as possible. I tried to come up with ways to make it so the nurses didn't have to do anything. And to the best of our ability, I think we accomplished that. And to get started here so I don't ramble, first of all, you need to think about if you want to take your dog. Is it okay with the doctor? Are you going to want to deal with the dog? I mean, you know, service dog owners, they have to be attended to. Are you going to feel up to it? Is the dog going to be able to manage? I thought Reagan could, but I still didn't know. I mean, he's always came through whenever we've asked him to, but he's a dog. I mean, you just don't know. He did amazing, but you got to think about the noises, the tubes, the cords, the hoses, the people in and out of the room, the interruptions, the new atmosphere, going to the bathroom, eating. There's a lot of things to consider. And if you're not feeling good, it may not be the time that you want to deal with it, no matter how well your dog's behaved. And if your dog isn't exemplary, and I'm not bragging about this little fella, we're just lucky so far, it's not the time to experiment. In the hospital's not the time to train. This is the time that you need to be on your game. And if your doctor and you all want to do it, then he can actually, or your dog can actually be a benefit. After going through this experience, Reagan helped me. He's not a therapy dog or an emotional support dog, but I would challenge any service dog owner that has lived with their dogs for over a couple of years, 24/7, that dog isn't some type of emotional support. They just grow on you. They're part of your family. And when you depend on a dog, Reagan tells me when I need medication, he smells my breath. And when you start depending on him, because I forget often, and he reminds me, it's a big deal. He's changed my quality of life. Anyway, back to the doctors and the hospitals. The first thing we did was we hung on the door was a placard like similar to what you hang on your mirror for handicaps. It says service dog in room, and you can find those on the internet. Very simple. Inside the door, we placed a training disc from Invisible Fence. It looks like this. What this does is you put the collar on the dog, obviously. Reagan's is set to the lowest setting because he just hears it. He doesn't even bother with it. So I don't want to hear bad comments about Invisible Fence collars. This is what works for us. And we had that set up at the door because you can set that disc up for 2 to 6 feet, I believe. So we set it on 4 feet, put it by the door. I showed him where it was. He never went out the door. I didn't have to worry about long leashes for people to get tied up on, tangled with at night. I didn't have to worry about a short leash where he couldn't get to his water or get tangled up. I didn't have to worry about him running out the door. It worked out really, really well. The next thing we did was we had a backup plan for my family coming in to let him go outside to go to the bathroom in the morning and in the evening. And as a backup plan, I had pads in the bathroom that I had put in there in case he needed to go. Through the whole 2-week period, he used those one time. He would rather hold it if he can, but the one time he used the pad. So that worked out really well, fortunate for us. Of course, we had his service dog garb, like his leash. He wears a service dog leash in regular clothes most of the time. I do have a vest when we fly, but other than that, I don't wear a typical vest typically. And I know you don't need it, but it's just easier sometimes to signify it. He's a service dog. Especially being little, we get a lot of questions. Bless you. And I'm sure everybody does, but we get an immense amount of questions, especially him being a Brussels Griffon and being an Ewok, etc. Like I said, I wanted the experience to be seamless for the office staff. We needed to deal with his food, which he eats raw food, so I had to have a cooler in the room, which I did get a bag of ice every morning and every evening and then repack that. And then every 2 or 3 days my wife would bring in more frozen food. About every other day, I think it was. So that worked out. I would just wash his bowls out after he ate, and he was happy. And the nurses didn't have to do anything except give me ice when they gave me my ice. So that worked out. We took a carrier. We took this little carrier. Now, when you have a big dog, this isn't going to work, obviously. But this little carrier, he would go in there whenever we went down for treatments or procedures, tests that weren't harmful to him or sterile. For example, when I go to x-ray, we would put him in the carrier. He would lay on the gurney, ride down to the x-ray with us, and then when we got to x-ray department, surprise, you have a dog. Yes, I do. And just act like it's no big deal. And I just said, He will be fine. He just needs to see me. That's all. As long as he can keep his eyes on me, he will be fine. And so what we would do is we would line the gurney up to wherever I was so that he could see it, and he would look through the little mesh. And like I said, I could have put him on a leash, but I didn't have to worry about him being in that little carrier, and he didn't mind. Now, obviously, like I said, that's not going to work if you have a lab, but I'm sure your dog will. You know how to handle your dogs in your situation. Now, the thing I had to be careful of is, since I had so many x-rays, is I was didn't want to worry about him getting too much radiation. So I would put him in the office on the windowsill where the doctors look out or where the radiologists look out, and he would sit in there and look out the window and see me, and he was fine. And I didn't have to worry about him getting too much radiation then. Let's see. Overall, it was pretty easy. He did amazing. We only had one time where we had a situation where I got a nurse that came in and asked for the administrator from the hospital. We were there 10 days, and the administrator wanted his registration papers. So you all know the routine. I said that'll be a problem because there's no such thing. And I said I will be glad to talk with the administrator. I'm not trying to be a smart ass, excuse my language. I just want to help them so that next time this comes up, they'll know the protocol. To which they never showed up. It was dropped. The nurse never came back and asked me anything, so I guess they got the message and may have looked it up themselves. I don't know. We only had one issue where the nurse got surprised, and Reagan sleeps underneath the covers with me, and she came in, and I had a PICC line in, which is an IV that is already inserted in. It looks like it's in my arm. So she was working on my arm, and then when she turned the light on, it must have scared him because he stood up, and when the blanket started moving, she jumped, he jumped, and that was the only episode we had the whole time. And she was aware he was there. She had just forgotten. So we all laughed. But be conscious of that, you know. Some of those nurses are not dog people, and there's nothing wrong with that. They just haven't had the experience, and some of them are not as dog friendly. We were fortunate where everybody was dog friendly. In fact, after he was there for a little while, people were lining up at the door in the morning to see if they could come in and see him, which kind of brought another problem on. You want your service dog to be working when he's working. And then after I was there for day after day after day, I thought, this is like his home. He can't be working all the time with people coming in and out. So I took all his vests off and his leash off and kind of let him act like he wasn't working, which people came in and they were respectful. I let a lot more pet him and interact with him than I normally would. Not everyone and not all the time, because I try to be careful of that. And he managed it well, and when we got back, we didn't have a lot of reprogramming to do. He went right back to his normal self. In fact, when we pulled in the driveway, he started barking and jumping up and down. He was so excited to be home. He said the Holiday Inn and the hospital are two different places. So that's what we did to make it better, to work for us. I hope that you don't have to go to the hospital. But if you do, and you do take your service dog, that it's a good experience for you, for the dog, and for the hospital. And we all have to set the bar high, especially, I think, for us little service dogs, because they're typically the category where I call them pet with a vest. fall into, and oftentimes we get accused of being a pet with a vest. But never has he been accused of it after they've seen him work. So we're very blessed. He just lays down and pretends to sleep whenever we go to a restaurant and disappears. And he's not perfect, but he's dang close to it, and I'm really proud of him. So you all have a great time. I'll see you on another YouTube. And if you've got any questions or comments or want to subscribe or whatever, you know all this stuff better than me, just do it. Love y'all. Bye-bye. There you go. You got it. Okay, now what? That's a good boy. You got that one. Okay, which one now? Good boy.